Remember when Britain ruled the airwaves, the football pitch and the fashion world all at once? The 1960s in Great Britain wasn't just a decade. It was a revolution wrapped in a Union Jack miniskirt. Did you know that in 1965 more British bands topped the American charts than American ones? But here's the twist. While we romanticise the swinging 60s, the reality was far more complex. Behind the psychedelic facade and Beatles mania lay a nation grappling with post-war identity, where traditional Britain collided head-on with youth rebellion. Today we're diving into 14 things that made 60s Britain extraordinary. From the controversial to the cherished, the revolutionary to the ridiculous. Some might surprise you, others might spark heated debate, but all of them shaped the Britain we know today. When four lads from Liverpool stepped onto the Ed Sullivan Show stage in 1964, they weren't just performing. They were launching a British invasion that would permanently alter global culture. The Merseybeat sound, born in the dingy cellars of Liverpool, became Britain's greatest cultural export. What most people don't realise is that the Beatles actually failed their first Decca Records audition, with executives famously declaring, "Guitar groups are on the way out." The movement wasn't just about the Beatles, though. Jerry and the Pacemakers, the Searchers, and Billy J. Kramer created a distinctive sound that merged American rock and roll with British working-class sensibilities. The controversial bit? Many original Merseybeat musicians felt betrayed when the Beatles moved to London and went psychedelic, viewing it as abandoning their roots. The Cavern Club, where it all began, was actually demolished in 1973, a move that sparked riots in Liverpool. Today's manufactured pop feels hollow compared to the raw authenticity of kids who learned their craft playing 8-hour sets in Hamburg's red light district. If you're enjoying this nostalgic journey through Britain's golden decade, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Coming up, UFOs and wacky space-age concepts. 2. They think it's all over. It is now. Kenneth Wolstenholme's immortal words as Geoff Hurst completed his hat-trick still send shivers down British spines. The 1966 World Cup victory remains England's sole major tournament triumph. But here's what they don't tell you in the highlight reels. The tournament was mired in controversy from day one. The infamous stolen Jules Rimet trophy incident saw the actual World Cup go missing just months before the tournament, only to be found by a dog named Pickles wrapped in newspaper under a hedge in South London. The North Koreans, making their debut, were deliberately housed in a Middlesbrough Catholic seminary to prevent communist contamination of the locals. Yet the locals fell in love with them anyway. Cold War politics potentially deciding football's greatest prize. Bobby Moore lifting that trophy represents the last moment Britain truly felt on top of the world. Picture this. Working-class kids spending their entire week's wages on a single Italian suit, popping purple hearts and fighting pitched battles on Brighton Beach. The mod movement wasn't just about fashion, it was Britain's first true youth rebellion with a dress code. While their parents made do with post-war austerity, mods embraced consumerism with an almost religious fervour. The attention to detail was obsessive. A proper mod would have their suit vents aligned precisely 14 inches from the hem, their tie knot had to be exactly right, and God help you if your stay-pressed trousers had a crease out of place. Women mods pioneered the geometric haircuts and pale lipstick that would define the decade, with Twiggy later commercialising what began in underground clubs. Here's the controversial truth. The movement was fueled by amphetamines. Purple Hearts and Black Bombers kept kids dancing all weekend at clubs like the Scene and the Flamingo. It wasn't just recreational, it was essential to maintaining the lifestyle. When the government cracked down on amphetamines in 1964, many argue it killed authentic mod culture overnight. What remained was sanitised, commercialised. The Who's My Generation becoming a museum piece rather than a battle cry. Time magazine's famous 1966 cover story declared London the swinging city. But the reality behind the myth reveals a tale of two Britons. While Carnaby Street blazed with neon and miniskirts, most of Britain still observed Sunday closing laws and watched black and white television. The swinging London that tourists flocked to see existed in roughly 1 square mile of the capital. The pill, legalised in 1961, revolutionised relationships, though unmarried women couldn't officially obtain it until 1967. This created a black market where young women would buy wedding rings from Woolworths to fool family planning clinics. Christine Keeler and the Profumo affair exposed the hypocrisy of the establishment. The same politicians condemning youth permissiveness were caught in their own sordid scandals. What made it special wasn't just the freedom, but the creativity it unleashed. Mary Quant didn't just design clothes, she designed a lifestyle. David Bailey didn't just take photographs, he made working-class photographers socially acceptable. For a brief moment, talent mattered more than your school tie. That meritocracy, however fleeting, was the real revolution. 5. Before health and safety regulations and sugar taxes, British sweet shops were temples of pure, teeth-rotting joy. A penny could buy you a small paper bag filled with cola cubes, aniseed balls, or sherbet fountains. The controversial reality? Many of these sweets contained ingredients that would horrify modern parents. Artificial colours linked to hyperactivity, enough sugar to fell a horse, and manufacturing processes that would make today's food inspectors faint. Flying saucers, those rice paper UFOs filled with sherbet, were allegedly inspired by the space race, though their inventor claimed he saw an actual UFO over Sheffield. Blackjacks and fruit salads turned children's tongues alarming colours, leading to urban legends about kids being rushed to hospital with black tongue disease. The truth was simpler, but no less concerning. The dyes used were the same ones used in the textile industry. The social aspect was what we truly miss. The local sweet shop owner who knew exactly what you liked, the agonising decisions over how to spend your pocket money, the illicit thrill of sneaking a gobstopper into school. Today's sanitised, pre-packaged confectionery can't replicate that sense of danger and delight combined. 6. The 1960s marked the moment British homes stopped looking backward and started looking up, literally. Inspired by the space race, British designers created furniture that wouldn't look out of place on the USS Enterprise. The iconic ball chair, the futuristic angles of G-plan furniture, and those magnificent Habitat catalogues promised a tomorrow that never quite arrived. Terence Conran opened the first Habitat in 1964, scandalising traditional furniture retailers by displaying a duvet, then called a continental quilt, as if foreign bedding might corrupt British morals. The shop's chicken bricks became middle-class status symbols, though most people had no idea how to use them properly. Here's what they don't tell you. Much of this space-age furniture was desperately uncomfortable. Those moulded plastic chairs looked fantastic but felt like torture devices. The open-plan living concepts ignored British weather. Turns out removing all your internal walls isn't brilliant when you're heating with a 2-bar electric fire. Yet the optimism embedded in these designs, the belief that tomorrow would be better than today, feels achingly absent from our current nostalgic, backward-looking culture. 7. While American children read about square-jawed superheroes, British kids in the 60s consumed altogether stranger fare. The Beano, the Dandy and the Eagle offered anarchic humour and space-age adventures, but the real revolution happened in the underground. Oz magazine, launched in 1967, pushed boundaries with psychedelic artwork and radical politics, culminating in the infamous 1971 obscenity trial. International Times reported on protests and happenings, creating a counterculture network before the internet existed. Even mainstream comics carried subversive messages. Dan Dare critiqued colonialism, while Dennis the Menace embodied anti-authoritarian rebellion. The controversial truth about British comics? They were far more violent and dark than their American counterparts. Action comic, though technically from the 70s, grew from 60s underground sensibilities. So violent it was eventually banned. These weren't just picture books, they were training manuals for questioning authority wrapped in 4-color printing. Loving these behind-the-scenes revelations? Make sure you're subscribed to catch next week's video. 8. In 1968, a giant orange ball with horns bounced into British gardens and promptly caused a nationwide injury epidemic. The Space Hopper, marketed as healthy exercise equipment, sent more children to A and E than any other toy of the decade. Yet we love them with inexplicable passion. What most don't know is that the Space Hopper was actually Italian, invented by Aquilino Cossani, but it was British marketing that made it a phenomenon. The original patent described it as a therapeutic device for adults, but British toy company Metoy realised children would go mad for them. They weren't wrong. At peak production, factories churned out 250,000 monthly. The unspoken danger was part of the appeal. No safety standards, no protective gear, just children launching themselves down concrete steps on what was essentially a rubber bomb. Modern health and safety culture, for all its benefits, has eliminated this element of acceptable risk from childhood. Sometimes a few scraped knees were worth the feeling of flying. 9. When the BBC refused to play pop music for more than a few hours weekly, enterprising DJs took to international waters. Radio Caroline, Radio London and others broadcast from converted fishing trawlers, bringing American soul, British beat and non-stop pop to teenagers desperate for something beyond the light programme. The establishment hated them. Tony Benn called them a menace to shipping, while the BBC claimed they'd interfere with emergency frequencies. The real threat? They were proving the state broadcasting monopoly was obsolete. When the Marine Broadcasting Offences Act killed them off in 1967, 1 million people signed petitions in protest. Here's the bit history sanitizes. These weren't jolly adventures. DJs lived in appalling conditions. Storms regularly threatened to sink ships, and at least one DJ died when rival pirates boarded his ship. The romance of pirate radio masks what was essentially a guerrilla war against government control of the airwaves. Their legacy? Radio 1, launched to replace them, initially hired the very DJs it had tried to silence. 10. When Alec Isigonis sketched the Mini on a napkin, he created more than a car. He designed a social revolution on wheels. Classless, cheeky, and impossibly cool, the Mini became the only car equally at home outside a Chelsea boutique or a Coventry factory. The design philosophy was revolutionary: 80% of the car's footprint for passengers, just 20% for the engine. Front-wheel drive, transverse engine, wheels pushed to the corners. Every innovation served practicality, yet the result was pure style. Peter Sellers owned one. So did working-class kids who saved for months. That democratization of cool was unprecedented. The untold story? BMC barely made money on Minis, selling them too cheaply to compete with bubble cars. Ford allegedly bought and dismantled one, concluding BMC lost £30 per car. They were right, but profitability missed the point. The Mini made Britain relevant in automotive design. When BMW finally bought the rights, they understood what BMC never did. Sometimes influence matters more than margins. 11th. Saturday nights in 60s. Britain meant one thing: gathering around the television for appointment viewing. Doctor Who premiered in 1963, teaching children to hide behind sofas. The Avengers made bowler hats and leather catsuits simultaneously fashionable. Till Death Us Do Part shocked audiences with Alf Garnett's bigotry, though many missed the satire. The controversial reality? British television was extraordinarily white and male. Cathy Come Home shocked viewers about homelessness, but employed 0 homeless people in its production. The black and white minstrel show ran throughout the decade, its racism defended as traditional entertainment. The few women on screen played assistants or victims, rarely leads. Yet television also pushed boundaries in ways we've forgotten. The Wednesday play tackled abortion, homosexuality and nuclear war when such topics were taboo. The BBC's commitment to public service broadcasting, however flawed, created space for experimentation impossible in purely commercial systems. Modern streaming services offer infinite choice but rarely match the cultural impact of everyone watching the same programme simultaneously. 12th. Before the 60s, foreign holidays were for toffs. Then entrepreneurs like Vladimir Reitz and Ted Langton realised they could fill chartered planes with ordinary Britons desperate for guaranteed sunshine. Benidorm, Mallorca and the Costa Brava became as British as Brighton, just with better weather. The truth behind those early packages was often grim. Hotels were half-built, flights were delayed by days, and full board might mean spam sandwiches. Yet Britons embraced it all with characteristic humour. The infamous belly paella became a rite of passage. Sangria, previously unknown in Britain, became our national drink. Never mind that Spanish locals considered it tourist swill. What we've lost isn't just affordable travel, but the collective experience. Everyone knew someone who'd been to Benidorm. Holiday photos were actual photographs, carefully rationed and treasured. The homogenization of travel. Every destination now offers the same international brands and Wi-Fi speeds, has eliminated the genuine culture shock that made those early packages adventures rather than mere relocations. 13. While the Beatles get to the glory, the British invasion was far broader and stranger than history suggests. The Rolling Stones sold Rebellion, the Kinks perfected sardonic social commentary, and The Who literally destroyed their instruments nightly. But dig deeper and you find Herman's Hermits outselling them all in America with music hall charm. The uncomfortable truth? Much of the British invasion was built on appropriation. British bands covered Black American blues and R&B, often making more money than the original artists. The Stones' first hit was a Chuck Berry cover. Led Zeppelin would later face lawsuits for uncredited borrowing. Yet these bands also introduced white audiences to black music, creating complicated legacies of both exploitation and exposure. What made the invasion special wasn't just the music, but the attitude. American pop was clean-cut and corporate. British bands were art school dropouts with something to prove. They brought working-class accents to American television, refused to smile on command, and wrote their own material when that was still unusual. That DIY ethos would inspire punk, new wave, and Britpop. British music's greatest gift might be permission to be difficult. 14th. The 60s marked the invention of the teenager as economic force and cultural category. Previously, you were a child until you started work. Suddenly, there was this liminal space filled with disposable income and dangerous ideas. British youth created distinct tribes, mods, rockers, hippies, each with their own music, fashion, and pharmacology. The establishment's response revealed deep anxieties. The Wooten Report on drug use described cannabis as largely harmless, so the government buried it and increased penalties instead. Universities expanded rapidly but maintained arcane rules. Women needed permission to wear trousers, men couldn't have female visitors after 7 p.m. The contradiction between treating youth as consumers while denying them adult freedoms created inevitable tensions. Here's what nostalgia obscures. 60s rebellion was often ugly. The mods versus rockers battles left Brighton seafront looking like a war zone. Skinheads emerged from mod culture but added violence and eventually racism to the mix. The idealism of flower power masked serious drug casualties and exploitation. Yet that raw energy, that refusal to accept because we've always done it this way, transformed British society. Modern youth, for all their digital sophistication, seem almost conservative by comparison. The 1960s gave Britain its last moment as genuine cultural superpower. Not through empire or industry, but through music, fashion, and attitude that conquered the world. We exported revolution in 4/4 time and primary colours. Yet nostalgia obscures how revolutionary it truly was, and how many of those revolutions remain unfinished. What we really miss isn't the artifacts, but the optimism. The belief that tomorrow would be different from today, probably better, certainly more colourful. In our current age of managed decline and lowered expectations, that 60s certainty that anything was possible feels like science fiction. Perhaps that's the most enduring legacy of the decade. Not what it achieved, but what it dared to imagine. If this journey through 60s Britain brought back memories or taught you something new, show your support by hitting subscribe and sharing this video with someone who lived through those extraordinary years. What did we miss from the 60s that you remember? Drop a comment below. I read every single one, and your stories might inspire our next nostalgic deep dive. Until next time, keep on keeping on. And remember, the past isn't just history, it's inspiration for building a better tomorrow. Cheers.